Well, joining me now for more is David Swanson, campaigner for Roots Action. Nice to see you, David. So I know you are a very outspoken when it comes to the military-industrial complex. Part of that system allows the Department of Defense to be the biggest polluter in the world. How is this able to happen?
Well, it's able to happen as described in your story, which was very well done, through the corrupting influence. I mean, there's a big wave now of books looking at the decline in war making, the decline in violence, but a lot of them seem to assume that as war becomes less popular, it will go away. The problem is that even if wars are unpopular, even if environmental destruction is unpopular, if a handful of powerful interests are controlling our government, that may or may not make any difference. And environmental groups fail to take on the military-industrial complex in the way that they would any other polluter, and this being, of course, the biggest one out there. Just as civil liberties groups fail to take on the military-industrial complex, those looking into the interests of labor and the poor and representative government. I mean, the military-industrial complex is the greatest enemy that any movement for justice in the world has, but there's a reluctance to join all these forces together and take it on. If we could get the environmental movement solidly behind that cleanup, you talked about it would take half the Pentagon's budget. Well, they've doubled their budget in the past decade. Take it back where it was. We were doing just fine as far as being the biggest military in the world, and put that money into cleaning the mess up. 25,000 contaminated sites just in this country from the Pentagon, and you'd take a big chunk out of unemployment in the process.
And David, who exactly is benefiting from this?
Well, profiteers are benefiting. The military is, of course, ever more, quote unquote, privatized, meaning it's our money, but without the accountability. The military-industrial complex is a huge part of how we funnel money from the 99% of us to that upper 1%. It enriches the rich, and it's funneled back in, now with barely any limitations at all, into congressional campaigns, and not just through contributions, but through jobs, through the pretense that the military is a good jobs program, and Congress members, of course, want jobs in their districts, which, you know, is why a lot of the worst sites are in the Southeast, or in the poorest neighborhoods, because going back to the 30s, it was seen as desirable to get military bases to come destroy your groundwater and poison your soil.
And this as the U.S. tries to advise other countries on environmental policies. How can the U.S. do so when it has its own cleaning up to do?
Well, with complete hypocrisy. It's not to say that every other government is doing a great job, but the United States has no more moral standing on this issue than any other. We have bases in most countries around the world. In the Super Bowl, they talk about the servicemen and women in over 177 countries. Many of those are doing incredible damage, and most of the places where there have been wars and military action, many of them involving the U.S., have done horrendous damage, leaving cluster bombs, depleted uranium, white phosphorus, nuclear radiation, ruining water supplies, ruining the ground for living in huge sections of the earth. And we have children being born with 3 arms, with 1 eye, as a result of this. And, you know, somehow that doesn't reach people's hearts in a powerful enough way. Maybe if they mine the Straits of Hormuz and the military follows through on its plan to send dolphins in to get blown up and find the mines, that will reach people. I don't know.
Well, certainly very shocking and terrible, the consequences of this. I mean, the damage has already been done. The messes have already been made. But why is it not a priority then for the Pentagon to clean it up?
Well, it's not the most profitable enterprise for the Pentagon. It's not part of the strategy of expanding power. They would much rather build a new base or go into a new country than clean up an old one. They are going in, as you mentioned, into Australia and other new nations, including more than likely back into the Philippines. Their desire is to expand across the globe, not to worry about cleaning up the messes left behind. And the damage in the places where they go in is incredible. Jeju Island in Korea is an absolute treasure. They're going to destroy the proposed expansions in Okinawa will destroy huge areas and untold numbers of species. And when they go into a place like Vicenza, Italy, where I used to live, the cultural damage, not to mention taking all the groundwater, is incredible. To turn a beautiful Renaissance town into essentially a U.S. military camp, it makes me deeply ashamed.
Lastly, want to ask you, I mean, we do see this shift to the Asia-Pacific regions. We do see this expansion, setting up new bases. Do you see this problem getting better in the foreseeable future?
Well, there is a chance of it getting better in that cutting military spending is talked about as rational and possible. And in fact, some initial cuts are actually mandated by law now until that's undone, if it is undone. So there is the possibility that there will be cuts and that they won't all be imposed on veterans' health care and non-military aspects of our security state, but that some of them will hit the military, and that in so doing, some of the lowest hanging fruit will be foreign bases. I certainly hope so, for any number of reasons, including our relationships with the rest of the world.
David, pleasure to have you on the show as always. That was David Swanson, campaigner for Roots Action.